And good evening, everybody. Welcome to another Hoops HD Monday Night Racket. Coming to
Woohoo!
you uh, live here this evening, Monday evening. We're recording this right around 10, a little before 10 o'clock p.m. Eastern. With me, first of all, is the puppet that has been banned from Christian Mingle himself, David Griggs. David, how are you doing?
I'm all right. Well, the good news is, after you had me locked up, or after I got locked up after the bourbon dinner, I just got a little bored, and you said not to talk about it, but I'm banned from Christian Mingle now.
Yeah, we really shouldn't discuss it because there could be some further legal ramifications here.
Well,
Um,
they said I did not meet like the spirit or the guidelines of their website, and I just got myself banned.
Well, again, we're trying to work on drunkenpuppetmingle.com, and as soon as we get you on there, I think things will be a lot better for you, David.
Oh wow, yeah, they will be.
Okay. Um, also, with
What?
Yeah, well, I think Griggs heard spirit and thought wrong, took the wrong definition there on that.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's been a great few days of college basketball being now the number one sport in the country with NFL in the
Yeah.
rear view.
Yeah, it has been a great few days, although we did have some very sad news this week with the passing of an absolute true legend. Dean Smith, one of the greatest coaches of all time, passed away. Joby, I know you're down there in ACC
Yeah.
territory. How are things down there, and how is the news taken around ACC?
It is the talk, as you can imagine, and even up north from North Carolina, as you would imagine, is dominating all sports talk across all lines, and it's a great homage to what is often referred to as the first of the modern coaches in a lot of ways. This is the guy who, he and Knight were the two that kind of were the bridge between the two ideas of modern basketball that we see now. And Dame was one who invented four corners, so
Yeah.
we really get the feel down here. And I've heard so many great stories from people like reach outs from Kay. Lefty Drizel has been just a breath of fresh air listening to him and some of the old stories that he discusses. But obviously, a passing. I was fortunate enough to see a few games live with Dean and those great North Carolina teams. It will definitely miss. He's been sick for a while, so it wasn't necessarily unexpected, but it's sad nonetheless, and we all have the chance to remember him.
Yeah, it is kind of cliche. I think when you lose someone to talk about how great they were and like what a legend they were. I forget who said it. In the case of Dean Smith, I really don't even think it's sufficient to say that. He got there in the early '60s when it was a very different game and it had a very different place, I think, on the hierarchy of sports in America, college basketball. And he was there as the game changed and morphed into what it is today, and probably its greatest time in the history. Like if you go from the early '80s to 2000, 2001, that range, he retired before that. But I think he was there for the ascension of what made college basketball from a popular sport regionally in certain areas to a major sport nationally, and he had a lot to do with it. Was he went to 7 Final Fours? I don't have his trivia in front of me, but he was consistent and he did it for over 30 years. Really
He
sad.
actually went to, I think, over 10. I don't know the exact number, but it was 11, I think. Is what
11 Final Fours, two national championships. Yeah, and really, I'd argue that he's one of the guys that really made the ACC what it was and what it really still is today. That
Yeah,
I mean, when you look back, yeah, there were a lot of other good teams in the ACC while he was there, with Duke's ascension, with NC State. But really, it was all about battling North Carolina, battling Dean Smith.
yeah,
and there's a great story. One of the comments that Lefty Drizel said, it was really fun, was referring to Norm Sloan. He thought forever when he joined the conference that Dean Smith's first name was Dan, because every time he talked to Norm Sloan, it was that damn Dean.
Yeah.
He just thought that was Dean's natural first name, and Dean was the middle name. But and here's the thing: is people forget that Dean Smith was viewed as the guy who couldn't win the big one for a long time until he finally won the national title off the Jordan shot against Georgetown. He was known as not succeeding because he had NC State down the road who won the title with Thompson, and so it was that over the final hump in '82, and then obviously another one later in '93.
Yeah, North Carolina is considered the bigger program in the state than NC State, and they are. But NC State had won it. They had won it in '74, and they won it again in '83. North Carolina just had the one, and it took them forever to get that. You're right, but I mean, again, 11 Final Fours. That's going to the Final Four every 3 years. I mean, that is remarkable.
Well, it's up with what Kay did a little bit later, where he had that streak of Final Fours, making the Final Four literally every year. I mean, we're very blessed to see in this part of the country. We have been very blessed to see some of the greatest coaches of all time live in front of us.
Yes, and down here where I'm at, I have seen. Never mind.
we may talk about that on the Under the Radar show.
The best coach in your area has been named Wimp. So there you
go.
Wow. Anyhow, getting to what we want to get into tonight is this is our Racket show where we do like to go through the major conferences, talk about the teams that are above the bubble line, talk about the teams that are on the bubble, and talk about also kind of a bit of a one-seed discussion here as well. And I guess we should simply start right at the top in terms of conferences, at least.
Yes, the American. Let's go.
And we're not going. We will talk a little bit of American, but if you want to listen to just American talk, you probably want to fast forward about half an hour now. But let's start with what is, I think, the best conference in the country, and I think it's hands down the best conference in the country, and that's the Big 12. As we're here tonight, we already saw a huge win by Oklahoma State, who not only beat Kansas at home over the weekend, now went to Baylor, picked up another win. And this Oklahoma State team last week did not get a single vote in the coaches poll, and I think had like only one or two in the AP poll. Now they are in the top 25 in both polls, and I'd argue with these two wins are now in that protected seed top 16 team range as well.
Yeah, I would agree with. Go ahead, Joey.
Yeah, without doubt, Chad. My God, I have been championing this conference all year. It is remarkable. 7 out of 10 teams. Yeah, I know it's the Big 12, but they may not be able to count correctly to 12. But 7 of 10, 70% of your teams are top 31 in the RPI or above. That's almost 1 out of every 4 teams. And Chad, you mentioned it offline, but I'll repeat it. I think you made a very good point that you could be looking at 5 protected seats. And it's not like they're all, like a few years ago, the Big Ten was kind of playing around with that, but it was a lot of 3 and 4 seeds. Yeah, they're going to be 3 and 4 seeds. I think you could see teams move up to remarkably high seeds. Kansas, obviously, is one of them. You see a team like Oklahoma State run the table, they're all of a sudden no one was talking about, and they're the new Virginia from last year to a degree at a 2-line or 1.
Joey, I got a math question here. I know you do the rankings, are kind of a math guy. We saw this league get 7 teams last year. It looks like they have 7, not kind of far inside the bubble again this year.
Yeah.
I had always been under the impression that 18 conference games sort of caused you to collapse on yourself a little bit, and that 9 was the better format than 10. Is that not true, or is it just that this conference is that good?
I think it is the latter, only because if you look at what they did outside their conference, they did well. I mean, the only notable game you think of, you go, oh well, Kansas got blown out by Kentucky. Kansas has a very nice little resume, beating teams like Utah, et cetera, outside of it. Combine that with other teams like Oklahoma, et cetera, who put together very solid resumes. And then, it does help a team. Like, for instance, a few weeks ago, we were talking about a Kansas State who was not good out of conference. Had Kansas State continued the run within the conference, it would have been a situation of all boats rising as opposed to beating up each other and sinking. And I would go with the latter.
Okay. I mean, again, because is it better? So you think it would be better in general to have 9 teams or at least a 16-game format instead of an 18-game format? It's just that this league is that good. I mean, I guess what I'm asking is there setup aiding them, or is it just that they're this good? I think you already answered the question.
Well, I would argue that it is aiding them, especially with the strength of this conference. It's not like a conference like the ACC where you have a lot of really good teams at the top of the conference as well, but then these teams got to go and play Boston College once or twice, got to play Virginia Tech a couple times, got to play Georgia Tech. You got to play all this garbage. It's just not there in the Big 12. Now, if the Big 12 decide to cut down 2 conference games, what do you think these teams would do? Would they go out and they schedule a game against Wisconsin and a game against Kentucky, or would they go out and schedule a game against Presbyterian and one against UNC Asheville? That's
Southeast Oklahoma State.
Southeast Oklahoma State, exactly. Yeah. I think you're more likely to see the latter, and even playing Kansas State or TCU or Texas Tech is better than that.
Yeah. Well, and Kansas has shown that they would actually probably schedule someone good, but everybody else, I think Presbyterian getting a lot of calls.
Right. Because, again, I mean, Oklahoma State, out of conference, they won at Tulsa, as did Southeast Oklahoma, but that's a pretty good win. They played Maryland. They played Oregon State, who is decent. They played Memphis, who is but it was on the road. Missouri, they're terrible. Never mind.
But again, if you're going to schedule 6 or 7 teams already,
that's a real game. Yeah.
But I'm just saying that, like, this conference didn't just go to the pastry cart. Collectively, I mean, I don't think Memphis is good. I'm not implying that they are a tournament team, but I am saying that it's not a buy game. It's not like playing somebody from the middle of the Southland or something like that, which is, we see far too many teams doing that in November and December. I mean, again, they did play some pastry cart teams. They played Sela, North Texas, Milwaukee, and Prairie View, but those were the only ones. Like out of a 30-game schedule, Oklahoma State is playing 26 games against real teams, and in the majority of the Big 12, with the exception of TCU, was like that.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah.
But I mentioned Oklahoma. They have a nice win against Butler. They went out. They played Tulsa, who's real. UCLA is now a NIT at least level team. Yeah. And then Wisconsin, Washington, Creighton. Creighton. For all you can say, Creighton isn't that good this year. Well, that's a real game. No matter how you break it down.
It's not like they played Omaha. Nothing.
The second worst team they played was Weber State, who's been winning the Big Sky regular season at a regular pace lately. Yeah.
So again, like, this is a conference that has benefited strongly from not playing cupcakes.
Right, and that's huge. It's what we're seeing this year in the SEC, where they upgraded their conference schedule, and as a result of which we could be looking at not just the 1 or 2 teams from the SEC we've been talking about the last 4 years, but we could be looking at 6, maybe even 7 teams there in the field. One other team here in the Big 12. I think we should speak very briefly about the one team that might not make the field out of this 7, and that's the slowly falling apart Texas Longhorns, or maybe quickly falling apart Texas Longhorns here. I know preseason our colleague Lee Delvecchio said he didn't even think Texas would make the tournament. We all laughed at him, especially when Texas went and won at UConn early back in November. Is there something seriously wrong here at Texas?
Well, when you look at their losses, I mean, they have 8 of them. I'm going to read, I believe, what is all 8 off to you here. Kansas, Kentucky. I'm just going to go off of your latest bracket, Chad. Kansas on the 2 line. Kentucky on the 1 line. Baylor, did you have them on the 6?
I had them on the 4.
The 4. Oklahoma, 4. Iowa State, 2. Okie State, twice, who we just talked about. And Stanford, who is on their way to the NIT. But 8 out of those 8 losses, 7 of them are protected seeds.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, don't you have to do something on the top of your profile? I mean, they have a neutral court win over Iowa, and I like the way this Iowa team is playing right now. other than that, they've won over West Virginia and nothing against anybody that's going to be in this field. And I think
The Beach is going to
something
win.
up there.
The Beach is going to win that conference.
Oh, they let me down over the weekend.
Well, yeah. I mean, maybe Long Beach, maybe UConn if they win that the American tournament.
Yeah.
But I mean, they've got a lot of tough games left. They've got, their next two games are TCU and Texas Tech at home, which they should sweep that. If they lose one of those, they really do have a problem. But beyond that, it's Oklahoma, Iowa State, West Virginia, Kansas, Baylor, Kansas State to end the season. They can't just keep losing to top 50 teams and not have enough wins to make the field.
Yeah, I got a little trivia here, and I realize when I say this, I'm going against my own statement of you can't think categorically. So I'm going to ignore my own advice and think categorically. I can only recall one instance where a team finished 4 games below 500 in their conference and made the NCAA tournament, and that was Florida State I don't even remember the year. But it rarely happens. At the same, I'm sorry?
There's the Bobby Sura team.
Okay.
Like 93 or so.
At the same time, we have seen a long history of the committee not penalizing teams for losing to protected seed caliber teams. And with the exception of Stanford, that's all Texas has lost to. So you could almost make a case either way that they belong in and even safely in, or with just the quantity of losses. I mean, that is a lot of losses that maybe they wouldn't be in at all. I almost don't know what to do with them. I don't think they're a top 25 caliber team, but I do think that they're at least a tournament caliber team, despite all the losses.
What will help Texas at the end of the day is the fact that we have basically 2 factors that help them. Right now, the bubble teams, the teams that start to float towards the bubble that we talk as high risers on this show. UCLA has been mentioned. Well, we've seen what's happened to them over the last week. Purdue had a bad loss this weekend. They're getting help that the teams that have to catch them aren't doing it.
Right.
The second element is there's a lack of conferences that are solo at large conferences. You have Gonzaga out there, so let's say Gonzaga gets upset in their tournament, it takes away a bid. There aren't really a whole lot of others. Yeah, there'll be some teams that sneak in. There's aren't a whole lot of other situations like that. Maybe you could argue Old Dominion, but it's that's pushed it. Maybe.
And it's only maybe, and I think that now that we have, it used to be we only really had 6 or 7 multi-bid leagues. Now we have 9. I think with that, you don't have the symptomatic of where a conference has one team inside the bubble and no one else is close. So if that team doesn't win the conference tournament, they steal a bid, so to speak. I don't think you're going to see that as much.
What you've seen is the teams that were traditionally in those positions have moved up into these multi-bid conferences. Your Creightons, your Butlers, your VCUs, even George Mason before the pre-Paul Hewitt era.
Before Paul Hewitt, yeah. Or they've hired coaches like Paul Hewitt, and they're nowhere near the bubble anymore. So.
Let's talk about another conference. We may actually see this year not only 5 protected seeds out of the Big 12, we may see 10 of the 16 protected seeds come out of 2 conferences total, because I think you could see 5 more out of the ACC with your Virginia, Notre Dame, Duke, North Carolina, Louisville contingent there.
Yeah, and again, I know that you had Duke and Virginia up on the one line. I am really impressed with both those profiles and both those teams. I mean, to me, they're just. I know who I like as my 4th number 1, but I think the top there's 3 teams on the one line that you can't even argue about, and it's Duke, Virginia, and Kentucky. I almost think Virginia. I do. I think Virginia has a better team than Kentucky. And again, you can point to some things on the paper. I've said it before. I think if the 2 were to play, Virginia would beat them. Virginia is really good.
I mean, if Virginia had won that Duke game, they'd be hands down number 1 over Kentucky easily. But right now, you have an undefeated team that has beaten Kansas, that has picked up a few big wins, and so until Kentucky loses a game, I just can't quite slip Virginia up over them. At least maybe if they both win out, and you talk about Virginia, winning the ACC tournament and beating Duke, I may reconsider at that point.
And it's all semantics. It's 1-2 no matter how you cut it. and Kentucky's going to Cleveland, and Virginia's going to, is Atlanta?
Syracuse.
Syracuse. Okay,
Syracuse.
sorry.
Yeah.
So it really doesn't matter that much who's 1 and who's 2, or really who's 3 and 4.
The only difference it would really make is which other region you play in your final national semifinal.
Right.
You know, the 1 seed might get the region that a Gonzaga comes out of, versus the 2 seed gets the region that Duke comes out of, and that is a pretty big difference there, I think.
Yeah.
And the one thing to watch with Virginia is they did suffer a very, very important injury this week in the middle of the Louisville game. They still hung on to win against Louisville, but Justin Anderson took the role, for lack of a better word, the Joe Harris role, the guy who's nailing the threes. He was leading the ACC in three-point percentage and took a lot. Yeah, it wasn't one of those, he just got barely past the minimum. Losing Anderson broke a finger in his shooting hand. He's going to be out between 4 and 6 weeks. He'll probably be back for the tournament. Rusty, but back for the tournament. I could see some slip-ups down the road that maybe Virginia wouldn't have had. Without Anderson, they definitely don't win the Miami game, for instance. He nailed that 3 at the end of the first overtime. I could see some slip-ups that would might happen, and thus put some losses in the category. NC State, we're going to see a lot. Wednesday night, NC State, a desperate team, probably on the outside of the bubble. That will tell us a lot. If Virginia goes into Raleigh, performs well, then okay, they're cruising and they might be able to continue this realm. We're going to know a lot. And that's a game that I think I pay attention to.
The other thing, when you talk of Virginia, when you look at their schedule, after this NC State game, they only have one other game left on the entire schedule against a team that's going to be in the field, and that's their regular season finale at Louisville. They are playing those Wake Forest, Florida State, Virginia Techs for the next 4 weeks. So they get through this NC State game. I don't see them having much trouble until that Louisville game, and I don't know if he can be back by then or not. That might be a little early for him.
Yeah. I mean, and that's a great point, Chad. This is the time, if, God forbid, no one wants to see an injury like that. But if they're going to have an injury, a period of that injury, this is the time to do it. But, you know, he helped spark the Virginia Tech game. Maybe they lose at Virginia Tech in that, slugfest in Blacksburg. And so who knows if there's a slugfest that we don't know about that comes up. The Texas A&M game that almost bit Kentucky. That sort of game. Who knows?
Right.
But I think Raleigh will tell us a lot on Wednesday.
And I do have to ask this. Do you feel like you're in Bizarro World hearing me praise Duke for how well they played on the road? I mean, that's just something that hasn't occurred in the 10 years or so that we've been doing this. But I mean, this Duke. Any other year, this profile is probably the top #1 seed. When you win at Virginia, at Whiskey, at Louisville, and those 3 teams have a combined total of 4 losses at home. Duke is 3 of the 4. And then again, I would
Kentucky.
Yeah, they lost a really tight one at Notre Dame after leading. They kind of let it get away. I would say that they possibly, only maybe, avenged that over the weekend.
Yeah. Of course, they also almost lost tonight at Florida State. They really did not show up for this game, but
it was a road game.
Okay. One other team I want to briefly discuss here in the ACC is this Miami Hurricanes team. Did pick up a win in a home game against Clemson that I was worried that they might lose that the way they've been playing the last couple of weeks. But team schizophrenia here.
Yeah, they've won at Duke handily. I believe they're the only team that has. And they've lost at home to Eastern Kentucky badly.
And they lost at Florida State, and they lost to Green Bay, and
yeah.
And they lost to Georgia Tech at home.
Right.
But then, the Clemson win, while you're not going to get into the tournament because of it, it's a good win. I mean, Clemson's an NIT team. I mean, they're not a dreg. It's not like a Virginia Tech, or Wake Forest situation.
Well,
we're all over the place. Well, we're all over the place with Miami because Miami is all over the place. Chad had them on his 10 line. I would almost have them up on the 7 or the 6. I guess that the good in them jumps out more at me than the bad. Joby, where I had your rankings here. I realize that these are not.
No,
You would scrub these when doing your own, but about where would you have Miami?
I'll be
Because
honest.
right now you got them. Is it 45? Wow, that's on the 12.
They're in, and I think that's actually kind of where I'm one of those is a believer that the play-in game, and I don't know if the committee does this, but I saw it with USC, I saw it with VCU, that if there's a lot of unknowns in a profile, in other words, it's either schizophrenic or you're from a small conference, that might not have been tested, but you really probably should make it, a.k.a. Stephen F. Austin.
Yeah.
The playing game's a perfect thing for you. Oh, we don't know what to do with you? All right, prove it on the court. I think Miami, until they string some more wins together or more losses, which would kick them out, they're kind of that team. They're that USC from about 5 or 6 years ago, which has the bad losses, the great wins. And when you're combining all of that together, it's like, okay, which team's going to show up? Let's see if you show up on Tuesday night in Dayton.
Well, I kind of disagree because I don't think the play-in game is a perfect place for anybody because I think we need to get rid of it and go back down to 64, especially with the crap that we have on the bubble now. But I do see your point.
Let's keep moving here, and let's move to another team on the one line. Obviously, Kentucky, #1 overall, and the SEC. We mentioned them briefly earlier that we've been looking at 6, maybe even 7 teams from the SEC this year. Came out with they've had their toughest non-conference schedule in over 10 years this year, the SEC, and I think we're seeing that pay off in that when these teams play each other and they actually have good non-conference schedules, they're boosting everybody else's RPI, as opposed to when you play garbage and then you play each other in conference, you knock everybody's RPIs down because all your opponents stunk and all your opponents' opponents stunk. And I think that's the reason why we're looking at a 6 teams. I think is almost a lock at this point for the SEC.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny to say. Kentucky, I don't think I know that this is going to sound crazy because they had to sweat out Ole Miss and Texas A&M and Florida, and Florida's most likely not making the field. A&M's on the bubble. Ole Miss is inside of it, but not top 25. With that being said, when Kentucky does not overlook its opponent, I think that there are only 2 teams that could beat them, and I'm not even saying that they would most of the time. It's just that they're capable of doing it. One is Virginia and one is Duke. Anybody else that Kentucky plays, they should. If they lose, it's because they blew it.
I'd throw Wisconsin in that group only because Wisconsin if Wisconsin is really on their game, nailing shots from outside, and Kaminsky, there's nothing. Kaminsky, if he's nailing threes, is an impossible matchup.
Yeah.
It would take that sort of Herculean effort to do it against Kentucky, but Wisconsin has the guns on the right day to do it, even if Kentucky brings a good day,
Yeah.
forward.
And I would agree with that. In fact, when I built the most recent bracket that's up on the site there, I had a huge debate over who was going to be my 4th #1 seed between Gonzaga, but it wasn't between Gonzaga and Kansas. It was between Gonzaga and Wisconsin at this point. I think once Wisconsin's that good, and I think that Wisconsin is seriously threatening for the one line right now.
Yeah, we'll get to Gonzaga in a minute, but yeah, I mean, I could see that too. But this Kentucky team, it's not your typical AC or SEC in the sense that there are at least a handful of tournament caliber teams in it. And again, to go out and run through the league when you have 5 tournament caliber teams the way that they're doing, it's not on the. I don't think it's quite on the level on paper as what Duke and Virginia are doing, but on the court, this is just a really good Kentucky team. They're not. It's not. They're not just beating up on cupcakes. Their schedule is, I believe, a top 10 overall strength of schedule.
I
Number
this
13,
is
exactly.
very special.
Yeah. So.
On the other end of the SEC, down near the bubble, amazingly, the second best RPI in the SEC right now, for
Yeah.
some reason, is Georgia's. But I think that this is the team of the SEC teams that is most danger of falling off the pace right now.
Well, okay, they have a healthy RPI. They've won 4 true road games, including, well,
Including
4 true road games. And,
One true road game, exactly. That's part of the problem I have with
yeah.
it. And wasn't the road game against Vandy?
Well, no. They've won at Vandy. They've won at Kansas State. They won at Chattanooga, and they won at Mississippi State.
Not a single top 100 team. Now, Kansas State and Vandy are better probably than that RPI indicates.
Well, let's not get carried away. If Mississippi State buys tickets, they will go to the NCAA tournament.
What Georgia has left, though, they are playing this Wednesday night. They're at Texas A&M. They also have a road trip to Ole Miss left, and a road trip to an Alabama team that has half a pulse, maybe not a full pulse, but half a pulse. So they're going to have chances for that road win. They're going to need at least one, maybe two of those three, though.
Yeah, and again, they have, let's see, a neutral loss to Minnesota. Georgia Tech is decent at home, but not great. In South Carolina, they've lost to 3 teams outside the field, 2 that are way outside the NIT most likely. And the only game that they have the only win that they have against teams in the field are at home against Ole Miss and perhaps Seton Hall, who we'll get to here in a little bit. I still think they're inside the bubble right now. I still think it's a much improved Georgia team. I think they will end up getting in, but they're not as good as their RPI indicates. They're not as good as Ole Miss.
I think somebody in the SEC. I think we wind up with only 5. I'm not saying Georgia's the one that falls. I think someone will go on a string of losses. LSU's looked a little weaker lately, for instance. Not saying LSU's definitely it, but something besides the Arkansas, Kentucky, who I both think are pretty solid, someone I think slips back. I mean, if Ole Miss goes on a bad run of Mississippi State, et cetera, then they could be that team.
I think the team, if it's not going to be Georgia, is going to be Texas A&M because they don't have that. I mean, LSU has that win at West Virginia. That's huge for them. A&M doesn't have that huge win at the top of the profile, which makes their profile one that 1 or 2 bad losses can knock them right out of the picture here.
Yeah, they won at Tennessee, who you seem to like, by the way, up until...
I looked up a couple weeks ago, no longer.
Tennessee has Cliff. Hello. I mean, Thelma and Louise style play lately.
Yeah.
Tennessee
hasn't hit the skids.
Let's keep moving here. Move on over to the Big Ten. We had a little bit of talk about Wisconsin already. I'd like to speak a little bit about this Maryland team that seems to be going in the wrong direction at the moment. Probably in the verge of slipping out of a protected seed and maybe even lower. They just lost yesterday at Iowa. I don't think losing at Iowa is a very bad loss at all. I like the way this Iowa team's playing, but they've lost 3 out of 5 as of right now.
Yeah. And what do they have coming up? And even still, some of their wins have been really close calls against teams you would expect them to, not have to sweat out. At home against Penn State, barely won that. At home against Northwestern, really needed a Herculean effort to come back and win that. Northwestern's more cursed than the Cubs, by the way. It's just an ongoing chronicle of how they have leads against good teams and then end up blowing it and never been to the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, it's they're
Arizona State, and that was a while ago, but it just seems like they're struggling against teams the tournament caliber teams should not be struggling against.
Right, their upcoming schedule, they play Indiana at home this week. Then they've got at Iowa and home to Nebraska before they play Wisconsin at home. They sweep those 3 games heading into the Wisconsin game. I think they're back, but they drop any one of those 3, they could probably kiss a protected seed goodbye at this point.
Yeah,
unless they beat Wisconsin.
You mentioned Indiana. Let's talk about. Well, I'm curious to hear what you guys think about them because I'm still really surprised by them. I think they'll end up in the field. I just don't know exactly how good I think they are yet because every time I see them play, they seem to play at a different skill level. And they only have 2 true road wins, by the way.
two true road wins. One of them was at an Illinois team that I think is right there in the field. But they also have a neutral court win over Butler, and that
Yes.
is enough to really boost them up there. I do like this Indiana team right now. They have lost 3 out of 5 as well, but they were at Ohio State, at Purdue, and at Wisconsin, all of which are very forgivable losses. They only have one loss. It looks like somewhat of a bad loss. That's the home loss to Eastern Washington, and I don't think that's that awful of a loss. This Eastern Washington team is probably looking at a 13 seed right now.
Right. Well, they're this year's Weber State. I mentioned Oklahoma scheduled Weber State preseason. Well, Eastern Washington has taken that role for this year as as the best team out of the Big Sky.
Yes. And they held on to beat Texas Southern, which is something Michigan State was on to do.
Yes. They actually pounded Texas Southern. But.
And you mentioned Ohio State. Well, this is a team, they're in the field. They've put together a nice resume right now, but, man, they need to win away from home a little bit more. I mean, Minnesota, I think, is their only road win. I mean,
yes.
Of note.
Where was Ohio State in the rankings today?
Russell's awesome, but they need to win away from home to prove something to me that they can make a noise in this tournament.
I agree with that. Where was Ohio State in the rankings today?
They're right around 20th or so. They're still right where they were last week.
I don't. Has there ever been a team other than those Utah State teams who don't count because it's just such an anomaly, as undeserving of a ranking as this Ohio State team? I mean. But it's impressing the voters. I think they're a tournament team. I think Chad had them in the 8-9 range. That's about where they belong. They are not one of the 25 best teams. It's not even close.
The problem with it is that voters are
just home court heroes right now.
Yeah, I know.
You value road wins a lot, David, and I do too. But that's why it's so tough. They need to prove it to me to be a protected seed. They need to win on the road. But I'd still think they're in that 6 range. I think they're above 8-9.
Right. Well, Ohio State right now is tied for second in the Big Ten. They have 18 wins overall, and they have an RPI, in the 30s, a Ken Palm rating of 14. I think that's about as far as the voters go when they look. They don't realize that Ohio State played an absolute garbage non-conference schedule. It was
with the exception of High Point. 13 of those 18 wins came against teams that are nowhere near the NIT. And I mean on the other side of it.
Right now in the Big Ten, we actually are sitting here with 6 teams tied with 4 losses for second and third place. Some of them 7-4, 2 of them 6-4. One of those teams is still this Purdue team. It's 7-4 in conference. Did lose a game now at Minnesota, but I don't know that we're done talking about Purdue for the year yet.
I don't think we are, but that was a winnable game, and Purdue they're going to have to really sprint to the finish here, and that was a stumble that they really could have avoided and didn't need.
Yeah, I mean, they may have to win their game at Indiana that's coming up. They may have to win their game at Michigan State, which are the losses that we thought they might have. But I think if they can win, they suffer 1, maximum of 2 more losses before if they lose 2 more games between now and the Big Ten tournament, they're going to be 10-6 heading into the Big Ten tournament.
10-6.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry, they'd be 10-8 heading into the Big Ten. 10-8 heading into the Big Ten tournament. When was the last time a Big Ten team won 10 games in conference play and did not get an at-large bid? We'd have to look back at that.
State did it once. I think they were 10-6. I don't know if Northwestern has ever won 10 games. They were left out.
Right. But it's not common, especially we're looking at this Big Ten conference now as at least 6, maybe 7 teams, maybe 8 teams. But
yeah,
Purdue would be that. I'm not sold Michigan State's all safe. We were talking about Maryland.
Not either.
What have they been doing lately? They've been kicking the heck out of Michigan State lately.
Yes. Most of Michigan State's opponents.
Yeah, I agree that Michigan State is right there on the bubble, maybe on the bad side. Illinois, I mean, that win at Michigan State this weekend they had propels them over Michigan State in my book.
I agree, 100%.
Okay, we saw this Illinois team last year absolutely stink until about the middle of February, and they were just rampaging through it. losing in the opening round of the Big Ten, but it was a close game. They had a shot at the end to win it. And prior to that, they had been knocking off, I think they'd beaten 3 ranked teams in a row. Do we need to send some calendars to Champaign Urbana to let them know that, like, they need to start playing like that before the middle of February?
Well, what they did pick up a neutral court win against Baylor back in November, and that is one of the huge points
That's carrying them a
carried
lot.
them.
Yes.
That and what they're doing lately in the Big Ten, to their credit.
Yeah. And again, winning at Michigan State, who it's still a road win, I mean, it was big over the weekend. I do think this Illinois team has gotten a lot better. I mean, just watching them in their last couple games, they've looked better than they've looked all year. And for that reason alone, I think they're going to get the wins they need to be safe. It's just, what took you so long to get to this point to where you're playing this well?
Well, I'll give Iowa a similar deal. Iowa had, the nice win at North Carolina, but then seemed to go on vacation a little bit for a little while. And now they've gotten back in the rhythm, and I think Iowa likewise I think Iowa's definitively played themselves in the field even more than Illinois. And
I think Iowa ran into a bit of a scheduling quirk that really hurt them. They had they had 3 games in a row late January at Wisconsin, at Purdue, home to Wisconsin. To have to play Wisconsin 2 out of 3 games.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and I'm not too surprised they lost the Purdue game in the middle, because what are you thinking about when you just came off a loss to Wisconsin? So I kind of give Iowa a pass on that. They really got screwed by the Big Ten schedule makers this year, I think.
Right.
But you know what? They've recovered, and they're gonna be treated fine. That middle single digit seed in the tournament is presumably if they finish out how they're playing.
Let's move over to the one other conference that's going to probably looking to get more than 3 or 4 teams in, and that's the Big East. Villanova is probably still on your 2 line right now. Probably still solid on the 2 line.
Though. I'm telling you, if it weren't for such a great selection of 1 seed caliber teams, in any other year, they'd be the 1st or 2nd overall seed.
I agree with that. It's just that the teams at the top of the seed list have remarkable profiles, and this is the most good teams we've had in college basketball in a long time. And as a result, we have a 1-seeded caliber Villanova team that's nowhere near the 1 line right now.
Yeah, I'd argue that they're 7th or 8th overall right now, and they've got a lot of really good teams to hurdle over that they may not be able to if they keep winning. The other team knocking on a door here in the Big East is knocking on a door of a protected seed, and that's this Butler team.
Yes.
I think Butler is a protected seed.
Okay.
I realize that they kind of struggled in their last game, but their paper is awesome, and we do it every week. They, North Carolina neutral floor, Georgetown neutral floor. Away, at St. John's, at Seton Hall, at Marquette. I mean, just the list of games that they've won away from home is pretty remarkable. And on top of that, not to the degree of Illinois, but this team is getting better and better and better. It isn't just they're not just paper heroes. This is a good team that can beat really good teams and has. They're really good.
Exactly right. And when I look at this, a little off Butler, but as I look at the other teams in the Big East, it starts to get me a little bit of that Big 12 feel that you discussed earlier, David. Are all boats getting risen by the schedule or not? And it's that same sort of. I'm seeing a lot of the same scenario here. Now all of a sudden, the DePaul loss doesn't look just appalling.
Right.
So to speak. I mean, I look down at the conference standings and I see St. John's, who is in Seton Hall, who are seriously considered for the tournament. I'm not saying depending on whose bubble you look at, they're in or out, but they're definitely in the discussion, and they're sitting in 8th out of 10 teams. I mean, that's pretty remarkable.
Well, what you look at there, the Big East, though, is a lot of bubble here, especially mentioned Seton Hall and St. John's. Xavier kind of bouncing around whether they want to be on the bubble or above it a lot. And I want to throw this out there. Is Georgetown heading towards the bubble right now? because I think this team is playing awful at the moment.
Awful might be overstating it, but they need to. Maybe they're just, is it that Providence is, because Providence is a weird team. I mean, that's,
They're not Miami weird, but they are weird.
Providence is a weird team. The fact that they can't get past themselves when playing Providence and Xavier for that matter.
Yeah,
Maybe they just have awful matchups with those two teams because besides that, they're beating Butler. They're beating Nova. They
clobbered Villanova earlier in the year, and
it's only been 2 weeks. I mean, it's not been that long ago.
Yeah, and I don't know. Like, I don't think they're heading towards the bubble. I will say this about Georgetown: I don't have confidence that they would get past the first weekend, whereas I think Butler can and Nova can. And like you said, I think we have a lot of solid tournament teams, most of them inside the bubble, but I don't know how many of them will be wearing white, and I don't know how many of them will be playing after the round of 64.
Well, and we mentioned the Villanova win. Here's two other games that don't, you glaze over when you look at their schedule, but you look at the numbers. They took Wisconsin, on a neutral court to the fullest, to a 3-point game, and they only lost to Kansas by 5. I mean, this team is a little,
Yeah,
you're right.
Well, I mean, but maybe it's just they can't play against Providence and Xavier. I mean, maybe
it could just be they can't beat those teams.
You take out those 4 games from their schedule, and they've got a great profile.
They're scared of religious guys with swords. That's what.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's move over to a conference that does not have teams in the bubble. I think it's looking like possibly a 2-bid conference completely falling apart, and that's the Pac-12. Starting at the top here with Arizona, who in my bracket I put out this morning, I actually knocked the Wildcats down to the 3 line. It's probably a temporary knockdown because as we do this, Iowa State, who I moved up, is down 16 points to Oklahoma.
Having a 10-point lead earlier in the day.
Right.
Yeah.
Playing right there.
But Arizona is sitting here right now, only 3 losses on the season, but these 3 losses were to UNLV, Oregon State, and Arizona State now. I mean, that is as ugly of a collection of 3 losses as anybody else that would talk about anywhere near a 1 or a 2 seed. Maybe as ugly as anybody in the protected seed range.
Yeah, well, you're probably right. Duke lost to Miami. Those aren't that ugly.
These are 3 teams that are nowhere near the bubble.
Losses to teams that are not in the field, nowhere near it, and that's odd. They do have the 4 wins away from home. I think that would jump out at the committee. But again, you can't read too much into this because a win is a win and a loss is a loss. The Oregon State and Arizona State games were close games, sort of.
Well, this is the first time I pulled it out this year, but I had to say I've used in past seasons, that good teams don't lose close games. Good teams win them, and Arizona State did not win them; they lost them. They have some good wins.
Arizona State is winning close games because of the curtain of distraction. Come on, guys.
That is. I just got to give a shout out because it's the only time we'll ever mention Arizona State on anything having to do with brackets. Is coaching there. The curtain of distraction is one of the greatest conceptions in college basketball fandom history. It is phenomenal. Whoever those kids are that came up with that, that is awesome. I love it. How do you shoot into that? I would die laughing every time.
And the thing is, they ran the numbers. There is something like a 10% difference between shooting on the 2 sides in games. I mean, that's remarkable.
This is the first year I've noticed that. Have they been doing that? That is hilarious. I mean, that is hilarious. Oh boy! Anyway, it's the Racket show, not the. That is hilarious.
Not the Herb Sendek homage show.
Yeah.
Let's just briefly talk about Utah. I think that's the other team that's solidly in the field here for the Pac-12. I know they're still sitting there at 11th or 12th in the polls. I still don't see with this Utah team. I think all they have really done is being Wichita State at home. You
Yep.
know, they'll get Arizona at home. They win that game. You know, maybe now they've got enough that I say, hey, listen, this is a protected seed. I don't see them in the top 16 teams in the country though right now.
Yeah, because I mean they've beaten Utah, UCLA both at home. Those are probably their best wins. I got really excited when they went into BYU and won. It was a really hostile environment, but I think I was overvaluing BYU at the time. Beating BYU is turning into a pastime this year. Everybody's doing it. So, I mean, maybe it wasn't that good of a win. I don't know. Like, they have a lot of decent wins, no real good wins. It depends on, I guess, just the verbiage here. Tier 1 wins are wins away from home against protected seeds. They don't have any of those.
And I don't think you could be a protected seed with none of those. And they're not going to
Yeah.
get any of those unless they win the Pac-12 tournament. So
Yeah.
And you know, what's weird, I do think that there will be 3 Pac-12 teams. I'm going to go ahead and stick my head out because I think one of the Oregon, Stanford, UCLA teams they won't beat up each other though. UCLA, what are you doing? I mean, UCLA was actually on a path to get seriously looked at, and then they just barf all over themselves in Berkeley.
yeah,
I mean, it's like, what are you doing? But
Speaking of barfing, what has happened to Stanford?
I mean, great question. You know, they at least had the road win at Texas, but now Texas is not, is not that top 20 team. There's
Wow.
I don't know that Stanford was ever that good this year. I think their profile looked a lot better because we said, oh, this is good. And then we realized that, hey, Washington, even before Upshaw went out, was only very mediocre. And Texas is a mediocre team this year, not a great team. So that's probably one of the biggest things hurting the Cardinal right now is that their good wins that they were banking on are no longer quite as good of a win.
Right. But
now,
Oregon has that nice win over Illinois. Oregon has that nice win over Illinois. So if Oregon, they're starting to win some games. If Oregon goes on a run and maybe picks up a nice little snag from a Utah, Arizona in the tournament or something like that, I think Oregon we might be discussing down the stretch. Of course, then they could also lose in the basketball version of the Civil War and throw it all away again.
Well, yeah, Oregon has a game this weekend at UCLA, and next weekend they're home to Utah. If they can, get those 2 wins, getting wins against USC and Colorado in the middle there, they're definitely right there, in my opinion.
They need the weekend win against UCLA, and that's sort of the game that I'm talking about. That one team rises up, but if UCLA then goes out beats Oregon, and UCLA snags a couple of wins and doesn't have any more stupid games like they did against Berkeley. They're very good out-of-conference schedule, even though they didn't perform great on it. I think will be looked at pretty favorably by the committee. They will be getting benefits of the doubt if they can at least get in the room of doubt.
Yeah.
Let's stay out west here for a second. The Mountain West Conference.
Oh my God! We had a front range plane crash over the weekend.
Well, let's talk about that. First of all, Wyoming. Was starting to play like maybe a tournament team, although all they've done is beat Colorado State this year and not much else. Goes and loses at Air Force. I think they, absolutely that they may have killed any chances at this point.
When I was talking about teams on the bubble, they might be okay because teams on the Texas might be okay because teams in the bubble aren't doing them disservice. This is a great example of it. I mean, Wyoming was ahead of Texas if Texas continued on this slide, but not anymore. Texas can continue to slide, and they're not going to slide below Wyoming the way this is playing.
Yeah, I've got no faith left in this Wyoming team. They have one road win at Colorado State. Their next best road win was at Montana State, so that shows you there. Now, but I do want to mention another team in the Mountain West here. How about these Boise State Broncos?
Yeah, football school.
Huge win yesterday
I'm
against
curious to hear. Yeah, they've kind of crept up here. I've always talked about how disappointed I've been in that program since Leon Rice took it over. They did go to one NCAA tournament. He hasn't done a bad job, but I was expecting them to be inside the bubble most of the time. But here they are, and they kind of snuck up on you. A decent win at St. Mary. I know St. Mary isn't a tournament team, but they're going to get a lot of credit for that win because of how strong St. Mary's is at home.
And how about they won at New Mexico? That's not an easy place to win any year.
Yes, again, what's New Mexico's record at home? Does anybody? I can pull that up here in a second. But anyway, again, so their profile isn't something that I think a lot of bracketologists would, because again, when you're looking at top 50, top 100, it's not there. But when you start to pull back as they say, when you start to peel away the layers and do a close examination, their profile isn't bad. New Mexico's 9-3 at home, by the way, so they're going to get a lot of credit for that win. This is a team that has no really high caliber wins, but they have a lot of decent wins. They beat Colorado State at home, beat San Diego State.
San Diego State are good wins, right now. I know
they both came at home.
They've had a bad week. Both of them, they've had bad weeks, but
yeah,
they're good wins.
How close was this team to your bubble, Chad? Because I was on the. I think I would have them in over Temple.
I had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They were my 6th team out, so they're right there. A couple more wins. They have their next 5 games are all very winnable. The toughest one in that batch is at UNLV. Then they got their trip to San Diego State. Obviously, if they win that game, I mean, they win their next 7 in a row. I think that they're there. Even if they don't, they lose the game at San Diego State. If they win the rest of their games this season besides that one, maybe at least make the semis, if not the championship game in the Mountain West tournament. I think that they're in very serious consideration here at this point.
Yeah, and I think they're good enough to do it.
Only had 4 out, just to put in perspective.
Okay. And they're playing better now than they have been for most of the year. I think they're good enough to pull that off. And then again, we had Wyoming, who got crushed by Air Force.
Yeah, Wyoming is now in triple digits in both BPI and KenPom ratings, and I don't think teams that are in triple digits in those ratings are have any serious consideration.
Right.
We got San Diego State and Colorado State. I still think those are both solidly in the field. Colorado State sweated that this weekend, but did pick up the win.
God, that was ridiculous. In Colorado State, I mean, they're inside the bubble, but I mean, they're close to it to where they can't go on a stretch where they lose 3 out of 4 and survive it, I don't think.
Well, they can't lose to teams at the bottom half of the Mountain West Conference. Yeah. I think a single loss to an Air Force-type team that used what we just were discussing, I think a single loss like that throws them squarely on the bubble where it's like, oh, are they in or out? And maybe out is the answer that a lot of people will say.
And again, looking ahead at the Colorado State schedule, they have a trip to San Diego State. The rest of their schedule is against that bottom, so they can only afford one more loss.
Yeah, and unlike the Big 12, where all of a sudden, you slip up against TCU if you're, I don't know, would be a Texas. Texas slips up against TCU, just hypothetically. Texas still has the chance to win some games to make up for a TCU loss.
Right.
Colorado State, you got San Diego State road game. That's it. Mm-hmm. If you lose one of those games at the bottom of the conference, you must win at San Diego State, maybe, or do something in the tournament, the conference tournament.
Yeah.
Well, speaking about teams kind of in the same ballpark as this Boise State team, we now have a 2-way tie at the top of the Atlantic 10 between VCU and Rhode Island. Joby, I know you had Rhode Island pretty high in your rankings this week. So I'm going to throw this to you on the Rams.
It embarrasses me. They haven't done anything. I mean, if there's a paper tiger, it's because UMass is probably higher than they should be, and thus they get credit for a good win against UMass. GW probably is a top 50 team, and so that is a good win, and that their RPI is probably accurate. But it's because they didn't lose that, and it's also because here's the other thing: is the division factors by number of games played, so their swings are a lot greater because they played like 3 or 4 less games than almost any other team out there. They played 21 games, whereas everybody else has played like 24. I know that sounds weird, but their rating will swing a lot more because the denominator is based on number of games played.
They've avoided bad losses for the most part.
Right.
Yeah.
Which is commendable. Here's my issue with them. Is LaSalle an NIT team?
Probably not.
Probably not. Yeah.
Okay, they have one win against a team that is inside the NIT range, and that's the win at home against George Washington. You gotta see somebody. Come on, unless you're good, Davidson. There.
I think Nebraska might be an NIT team, so that might be a second one.
No, they're. I don't. Do you really think so? I don't think Nebraska's close.
I think for the name, well, you get. I mean, the old NIT when it was not chosen by a committee may have taken Nebraska. The new NIT maybe not.
Right.
But here's the thing about Rhode Island, which is spooky, because I started talking about other teams that a lot of people, they're in. Like I think earlier in this call, we talked about Georgia. Oh, Georgia's in. Yeah. Right now because they have a high RPI and stuff.
Georgia has at least beaten some NIT teams.
Georgia's made top 50 wins as Rhode Island, and not as good a record. And Rhode Island is actually leading their conference and not in the middle of the pack. And it's a decent conference, not a great conference. I know it's not the ACC or even the SEC this year.
What's Rhody got ahead of them?
It's a high-end, mid-major, low major, whatever you want to call it. And I'm not saying Rhode Island should be in, but all of a sudden I can't believe that we're actually seriously discussing them, and they probably should be seriously discussed.
In terms of their schedule, they pretty much are playing the bottom of the A-10 the rest of the way, other than a home game against UMass and a game at Dayton. So they probably need to win out here.
Yeah.
Let's talk about those other two teams here. I mean, VCU, we know they've got the Briante Weber injury. We're still waiting to see. Got time to recover from that and learn how to play without him still.
They look bad without it.
Yeah, but they're still solidly in the field right now, obviously.
Yeah, they're solidly in the field, but again, just so unfortunate. This was a protected seed caliber team. I think we were expecting a Sweet 16 or more. I really do hate seeing something like this happen. I hate it for their players. I even hate it for their fans. I mean, it's really exciting when your team is in that situation, especially when you're not used to being in that situation, and I just hate it for their program. I do think they'll get in. I don't think they'll go very far, and we'll see.
The other two teams here in the A-10, Dayton and George Washington, we saw a real good game over on Friday night, actually. Yeah. GW picked up the overtime home win over Dayton, and I think GW needed the win a little bit more than Dayton did, so I think that kept both teams in the field for now, at least.
I agree. Yeah. I think they're both – they can't slip up, but I think they're both in that – they're probably both wearing dark jerseys, but had Dayton won it, one team's wearing maybe a white jersey as an 8 and the other's out. So it probably is best for the conference that GW won.
Again, the one thing that both of these teams have done for the most part is that they've avoided bad losses. Yeah. And again, that's no small thing, but there isn't a whole lot in terms of quality. GW did have that win against San Diego State. That's pretty good. Dayton, it didn't. No one thought this at the time. I sure didn't. The neutral floor win against Texas A&M, that's probably their best win on the year, wouldn't you say?
It's a win against a tournament team on a neutral floor.
And they've avoided bad losses. They've been fair on the road. I mean, again, that was such a big game, that Dayton George Washington game. Because it's two teams that are in, but neither are really safe. And by not safe, I mean if they go through a stretch where they lose 2 of 3, 3 of 4, they're probably way outside the bubble. The one issue I have with Dayton, and again, this will work itself out one way or another. I don't know if they have the personnel to get the wins they need to stay inside the bubble. Now, so far they've done it. They've avoided bad losses, but if it really comes down to them needing a big win to get into the tournament, I don't know if they're going to be able to get it.
Who would they play to get that big win, though, to be very honest? With VCU injured, I don't know if they have the opportunities. I mean, they have we talked about URI coming to Dayton. And URI will probably be throwing everything, including the kitchen sink, because they're going to be fighting for a spot. But that's almost a Dayton playing. Dayton would still be the favorite in that game.
Yeah,
The upcoming David Dane against VCU is a road game, so I think they get a little more credit for that if
Right.
they get that win.
Right.
yeah.
That's yeah. But once again, yeah, they the way I mean, Briante Weber is what made Havoc in its modern form right now.
Yeah.
And so that's when Dayton wants to secure and punch their ticket. Right, that's a key win, but there's not a lot of opportunities in the A10 for elite wins. Good wins, yes, but not elite.
Well,
Right. It's going to be an exciting finish. I mean, between Dayton and George Washington, I think they're the only two that are inside the bubble right now. But again, with Rhodey trying to play their way in, VCU, I'm sorry, yeah, VCU, and with Rhodey trying to play their way in, Davidson, who will certainly be in.
Boy, bad Davidson decided to show up the last couple of weeks, didn't it?
Let me, when it comes to the bubble, and I think that this is why we all say that the bubble is so awful every year, is one thing that we always notice is that these teams that are on and near the bubble are losing games, and they're losing games that don't make any sense. And you see that, so as you move from early January to mid-January to February, late February, what we see here is that kind of the quality of team every year, I think, decreases where that bubble line is, because bubble teams are not great teams and they do lose games. And if you have a team that is a little below that but that just keeps winning and winning and winning, even if they're not playing great competition, that team can slowly sneak onto the good side of the bubble, which is kind of segues me to the team I'm about to mention, which is the Temple Owls over in the American.
Okay.
Because, and I put them in my field today. I know a couple other major people that do brackets also had them in today. They have a huge win at home against Kansas. But they have now won 5 straight games, back-to-back road wins. Yeah, only South Florida and Memphis, but they're winning, and that's just something that nobody else in this bubble discussion is doing. They don't. Right. Their only bad loss is a rivalry game against St. Joe's. They have a win at UConn, which is decent. They've been a pretty good Louisiana Tech team, and they beat Kansas, a potential 1 seed here, and that's why I had Temple in today, and I think that Temple is right there on the bubble at this point.
I agree. As crazy as it is to say, and they have been winning. One of the things, and we do see it every year, and that's the thing, during championship week, conference tournaments sort of force the issue. I mean, because it matches a lot, like in a conference like the Atlantic 10 and in perhaps even the SEC and perhaps even the American, it forces bubble teams against each other, and it forces the winners to play the winners. So bubble teams can get into those conference tournaments, get a big win or two on a neutral court, and end up inside or outside. A lot of the times, it's one of the final deciding factors. In this conference, I mean, we're talking about Temple, but there's also Tulsa that'll work itself out. And who else? Like, again, is there anybody else? Cincinnati. I think Cincinnati's fairly inside the bubble. I think I like them more than you all do.
I think Cincinnati's inside the bubble. I'll tell you once again, for the 3rd or 4th time this year, UConn is back on my radar, vaguely on my radar, but they're back on it. They do have that neutral court win over Dayton, a win against Cincinnati, a win at the road against a pretty good Florida team. That's pretty much it. That Houston loss was disgusting.
Yes. Oh, they're on my radar. I mean, they're in Storrs, Connecticut. They exist. They're definitely.
Yeah, but I mean, they've got a huge trip coming up this weekend. They're at SMU. If they pull off that win, as well as beating Tulsa, I believe it's on Thursday night. I think we're going to be starting to see them back in fields again.
I mean, if they pull that win off,
is going to be in Dallas. It's going to get a national view. I mean, yeah, that SMU game is huge for them.
They're not good enough to beat SMU. I mean, they're just not very good.
They're not very good. But if they win this week, if they win another 2 games this week, you're going to be talking that UConn's inside the bubble. I hate to say it, but
no, we're going back to Wyoming.
Well, why don't we move over to outside of the major conferences? Obviously, Gonzaga. We've talked about them a little bit here, and I think that the biggest problem the Zags have in getting their 1 seed this year is going to be the fact that there are so many other really good teams there that are playing such better schedules than them.
Yeah, again, and it's like always, the paper will work against them. They're really high in the rankings. I made this point. The rankings do influence the committee. They're in the room. The NABC advisors, what that is that it's 32 coaches. It's one coach from each conference. They rank the 15 teams in their geographic region. So, I mean, we have the East, the South, the Midwest, and the West. Is that right? Yeah.
Yeah.
And I would imagine that one or all of them would rank Gonzaga. I would imagine that Gonzaga would be ranked number 1 in the West by everybody who votes in that regional. That's going to help them. But, again, it's just what do you value more, the paper or the human polls and the rankings? I do think Gonzaga is the 4th best team, but the paper doesn't back it up because of their conference.
I don't think there's anyone else in the West Coast Conference this year that's in any at-large bid consideration. BYU, if they win at Gonzaga and beat St. Mary's this week, may be worth talking about again at that point, but they have to do all of that and probably more. Missouri Valley Conference, though, I think this is another conference that is not only going to put 2 teams in the tournament, might put 2 teams in the protected seed range.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Well, go ahead. I love this Northern Iowa team. I know you had them on your 3-line. Just talk about this team. They're incredible.
This is a really good. I mean, this team, they're in the same position as Gonzaga. They don't really have the paper, but they've only lost twice against they lost at VCU in double overtime in what may still be the game of the year so far. And that was obviously the full-strength VCU team, which they're going to get a lot more credit for having lost that game. They have that win over Iowa. They've won at Stephen F. Austin, and they've beaten Wichita State already here.
And it wasn't close.
To say, you think they're one of the top teams in the country. I'll put it that way.
Yeah.
And Wichita State not that far behind them. Wichita State has beaten, especially if they get the split. If Wichita State ends the season with the home win over Northern Iowa, it may come down to the Missouri Valley Conference Championship game to see who's the 3 seed and who's the 5. That's
right. And I know the Valley isn't. I'm sorry, just one quick point. The Valley is not full of tournament teams, but it is full of teams that play very well at home. And I think that both these teams are going to get more credit than just the top 50 wins, the top 100 wins, if they go through this conference and win all those road games. Sorry, Joby, what were you going to say?
No, I think it's a very good point. We'll see if they climb up to the 3 seed, because remember, when we're talking about the 3 seed, all of a sudden we start creeping in, for instance, ACC schools like North Carolina and Louisville, et cetera. I mean, they could push them out. These Big 12 teams that we were talking about are to start the show. If a few of them go on a run against the other ones, you got to say, hey, look at Oklahoma. They just beat Iowa State tonight, and there's no way that they shouldn't be on the 3 line. And then boom, 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 boom. We'll see. On the Gonzaga point, I would actually. I don't think they're the 4th best team in the country. I think they're a good team. They're maybe the best Gonzaga team, but I just think it's because the country at the top is so loaded. I don't think they're better than Wisconsin, hypothetically. You mentioned the top 3 seeds that I would agree are all better. I don't know if they're better than Villanova. I don't know. Yeah, I know they're not better than Kansas. And in my opinion, but if they only have one loss. And let's say Virginia collects a second one. If Virginia collects a second one somewhere along the way, they're going to fall in the rankings below Gonzaga. We saw it last week when they lost to Duke, and they fall to 3 behind Gonzaga. One more loss, they're going to be probably permanently in the AP behind Gonzaga. I don't see how you keep the number 2 team in the country, if that were to come to pass, out of the top line. But I don't know if they're the best team. It's a good team, don't get me wrong, but It's just an unusual year for high-end, top-level teams.
One other team in terms of at-large bids here, I think this Old Dominion team, kind of doing the same thing that Temple is doing. They're not beating anybody noteworthy, but they're winning games when everyone else around them is losing. And If they can finish at least tied for first place in Conference USA, I think this Old Dominion team is going to get an at-large bid.
I think they need to win out, honestly. I mean, their profile's pretty good. Wins over VCU, LSU,
Yep.
winning a fair amount of road games. They're 3-3 in true road games. I think they need to win out in order to feel safe.
Well, I'm not talking about feels. I don't think they should ever feel safe. But I just think that at the end of the day, if they win out to the conference championship game and lose there, or maybe even lose one game along the way before then.
As long as it's the Western Kentucky or Louisiana Tech or someone, you can't have just an awful win. But even if you lost to UTEP, doesn't kill you.
They lose at UTEP. They lose the Conference USA championship game. I could see them making the first four. I could see it happening.
And they would be the type of team that I described earlier that would be perfect for the first four in that, do we know enough about them? Et cetera. Yeah, well, okay, prove it. Go play Miami, who is Mr. Schizophrenic, and see who comes out on top.
I think there's one other team we have to discuss, our old elephant in the room here. SFA pulled out the win at Northwestern State. It was not the type of blowout that they've been getting most of the season, but they did win tonight. Still undefeated in Southland play. I'll tell you, when I did the bracket that I put up yesterday, when I did my seed list, St. John's was my very last team in the field, my very last at-large bid. They were very close. They were above Stephen F. Austin, but it was very close at that point. I just think that this SFA team, if they win out, don't lose another game to that Southland Championship game, may have that same effect of everybody else moving below them while they stay at the status quo, and could put them in Dayton as well.
Okay, Joey, I need your math skills here. SFA is 20-3. That's roughly an 880 record or so.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Somewhere in that range.
Yeah, somewhere in that range. It can't get a whole lot better. It's not like Illinois going on a rampage or Purdue going on a rampage and going from like a 650 record to a 750 record. Their RPI is 85. Even if they win out, I don't see it moving up into what you would be considered the safe zone. I think SFA is really good. I think they're better than a lot of the teams in the bubble. I think Murray State is better than a lot of the teams on the bubble. I just think that the paper perhaps means more than it should, and the paper is going to kill this team. There is nothing here.
The thing is that there's nothing that they've done wrong. They lost 3 games to teams that are the top 35 teams in the country, 2 of those on the road. Losses to Baylor and Northern Iowa are both to protected seeds. They won at Memphis, which is not lousy, but it's a road win against a top 100 program. And they beat a Long Beach team that I think at the end of the day will find a way into the field. And they won at Sam Houston State, which is going to be a top 100 win at the end of the day, especially if Sam Houston beats them in the Southland title game. That's why I think that SFA is going to get a very long look. Maybe we find out that they were team number 69, they just missed the field, but I think they're going to get a very long look if they do this.
Well, it all resides on Sam Houston State. Stephen F. Austin's second favorite team should be Sam Houston State. They need a very strong Sam Houston State team for this scenario to play out.
I realize that we're 10 years removed or even 12 years removed from the start of this event, and satellite TV has given everyone exposure, so you don't need a showcase to do it. But in addition to being a showcase for teams that otherwise weren't showcases, the bracket buster that ESPN put together also, whether it meant to or not, it gave teams a chance to get quality wins late in the year that otherwise didn't have them. How much could SFA benefit from the bracket buster this year?
You're right. If they were playing Northern Iowa or Wichita State, sometime next few weeks, that would be absolutely huge for them.
Even a Murray State, Stephen F. Austin would be a thrilling game.
Yeah, it would be.
One thing I would note on Stephen F. Austin, they actually, I think, were 28th or 29th in the AP poll this week. They keep winning. They're going to be a top 25 team as well by the time we get to the Southland tournament. So
Yeah, they got
keep that in
close.
mind.
They got all the way up to 27th, I think, last year. I mean, they got really close to the rankings.
Well, they're on a pace to get to the rankings quicker this year than they were last year.
Yeah.
I think they'll get there if they keep winning.
The win. It is the win in the tournament last year. People say every season's unique, but
Yeah.
the win last year puts them on people's radars, even subconsciously in that room.
Yeah.
Final topic for the night, really quickly. Florida A&M, still by far the worst team in the country.
Yeah.
Central Arkansas, who was our other team without a win against anybody, did pick up a win this past week. They are now out of the centenary running. We do still have Grambling and San Jose State, who are without D1 wins, but they both have D2 wins. But FAMU is not going to win a game.
No. Okay.
Lost by 20 again tonight.
Lost by 20 tonight, and this was a game, one of their better chances to win, according to Ken Palm, at least tonight.
Yeah.
Yes.
So on that note, anything else we want to discuss here?
Just something else, and I don't know if we've communicated this to Joby or not. Thursday, a little bit of a different format. Instead of like limiting ourselves to trying to view it the way we think the committee will, we are going all out. We're using eye tests. We're using computer rank. We're essentially using anything we damn well want to use as three individuals, and we're coming in as if we are the committee and we're building it the way we want it. Screw trying to guess the committee, at least for this week. So, and with that in mind, I don't want to say this because we're using how good we think the teams actually are as opposed to maybe what the paper says or what the committee's paper says. Yes, I would have SFA and Murray inside my bubble. We're going to hash it out on Thursday. It's going to be awesome.
Well, we're going to disagree on Murray, but on that note, I want to wish everybody a good night, and thanks for tuning in again.
Oh, I got it. You got to turn it off here, Chad.
Oh.